hands.
Oh, this feels good. Come up to the fire, ladies.
I'm not cold.
I'm all right.
Now, Mr. Hale, before we start moving things about, why don't you tell Mr. Henderson just what you saw when you got here yesterday morning?
By the way, has anything been moved? Are things just as you left them yesterday morning?
Just the same. When the temperature dropped below zero last night, I had Frank come out here, build us a fire. No point in getting pneumonia with a big case on. And I told him not to touch anything but the stove. And you know Frank.
Somebody should have been left here yesterday morning.
Oh, yesterday. When I had to send Frank out to Mason City for that man who went crazy. I want to tell you, I had my hands full yesterday. And I knew you could get back from Omaha by today, and as long as I saw to everything myself, I saw no...
Thank you, Sheriff. Well, Mr. Hale, tell just what happened when you came here yesterday morning.
Well, Harry and I had started a town with a load of potatoes. We came along the road from my place, and when we got here, I said, I'm gonna go in and see if I can't get John Wright to go in with me on a party telephone. I talked to John about it once before, and he put me off. He's saying, folks talk too much anyway, and all he asks is peace and quiet. I guess you know about how much John talked himself.
Are you saying that he wasn't friendly?
I didn't say that. But I thought that if I went into the house and spoke about it before his wife, although I said to Harry, I didn't know as what John's wife wanted meant that much to John.
I think I'd like to talk about that later. But go on now with the rest of your story.
Well, now that is important.
Well, yes, it is. Well, I didn't hear or see anything. I just knocked on the door, and it was all quiet inside. Well, I knew they must be up. It was past 8 o'clock, so I knocked again, and I thought I heard somebody say, "Come in." I wasn't sure. I'm not sure yet, but I opened the door and I walked in, and there in that rocker sat Mrs. Wright.
What was she doing?
She was just rocking back and forth. She had her apron in her hand and was kind of pleating it.
And how did she look?
Well, she looked queer.
How do you mean queer?
Well, as if she didn't know what she was going to do next, and kind of done up.
And how did she seem to feel about your coming?
I don't think she minded one way or other. She didn't pay much attention. I said, "How do, Miss Wright? It's cold, isn't it?" "Is it?" she said, and just went on pleating at her apron.
Pleating at her apron?
You know what pleating is, don't you? I mean, that seems clear enough. No, you go ahead, Mr. Hale.
Pleating, you know, like folding, only queer. Anyway, I was surprised. She didn't ask me to come up to the stove or to sit down. She just sat there, not even looking at me. So I said, well, I'd like to see John. And she laughed.
Laughed?
Well, I guess you'd call it a laugh.
You know what a laugh is, don't you, Mr. Henderson?
So I thought of Harry and the team outside, and I said, kind of sharp, "Well, can't I see John?" "No," she said, kind of dull-like. "Well, why can't I see him?" "'Cause he's dead," says she.
She told you he was dead?
Just nodded her head, not getting excited, just rocking back and forth. "Well, where is he?" says I, not knowing what to say. And she just pointed upstairs, like that. And so I got up, thinking to go upstairs, and I walked from there to here, and then I said, "Well, what did he die of?" "He died of a rope around his neck," she says, and just went on pleating at her apron.
My God. Well, you go on, Mr. Hale.
Well, I went outside and I got Harry. I thought I might need help. So we both went upstairs, and there he was, just lying.
I think I'd rather you go into that upstairs where you can point it all out. Just go on now with the rest of the story.
Well, my first thought was to get that rope off. But Harry, he just walked right up to him and he said, no, he's dead all right. We better not touch anything. So we both came back downstairs and there she was, sitting the same way. Anybody been notified? I asked. No, she says, unconcerned. Mrs. Wright, who did this? Says Harry. He said it kind of businesslike. And she stopped pleating her apron. I don't know, she says. You don't know? Says Harry. No, he says. You were asleep in the bed with him? Yes, but I was on the inside.
Somebody slipped a rope around his neck and strangled him, and she didn't wake up.
That's what she said. I didn't wake up. Well, we must have looked as if we didn't see how that could be, because a minute later she said, I sleep sound. Well, Harry wanted to ask her more questions, but I said maybe we ought to let her tell her story to the coroner first or to the sheriff. So Harry went as fast as he could to River's place where there was a telephone.
Yeah, you did good, Mr. Hale.
And what did Mrs. Wright do when she knew you had gone for the coroner?
She moved from that chair to that one over there.
From that chair to there?
Yep, and just sat there with her hands together and looking down. I got the feeling I should make some kind of conversation, so I said, well, I stopped in to see if John wanted to go in with a telephone. And she began to laugh, and then she stopped and looked at me. Scared?
Scared?
Well, I don't know. Maybe it wasn't scared. I wouldn't like to say it was. Anyway, soon Harry came back, and then Dr. Lloyd, and then you, Mr. Peters, and I guess that's all I know that you don't.
Well, I guess we'll be moving on upstairs now.
Just a minute, Sheriff. You're convinced there's nothing important here? Nothing that would point to any motive?
Nothing here but kitchen things.
Ladies? Does it seem just like kitchen things to you?
Here's a nice mess.
Aw, her fruit, it did freeze. She worried about that when it turned so cold. She said the fire'd go out and her jars would break.
Oh, can you beat the women? Being held for murder and worrying about her preserves.
I guess before we're through, she may have something more serious than preserves to worry about.
Well, women are used to worrying about trifles.
And yet, for all their troubles, what would we do without the ladies? Dirty towels. Not much of a housekeeper, would you say, ladies?
There's a great deal of work to be done on a farm.
To be sure. I know there's some county farmhouses that do not have such roller towels.
That's true.
Those towels get dirty awful quick. Men's hands aren't always as clean as they might be.
Loyal to your sex, I see. But you and Mrs. Wright were neighbors. I suppose you were friends too?
I've not seen much of her of late years. I've not been in this house for more than a year.
And why is that? You didn't like her?
I liked her all well enough. Farmers' wives have their hands full, Mr. Henderson. And then...
Yes?
It never seemed a very cheerful place.
No, it isn't cheerful. I shouldn't say she had the homemaking instinct.
Well, I don't know as Wright had either.
You mean they didn't get on very well?
No, I don't mean anything. But I don't think a place would be any cheerfuler for John Wright's being in it.
I'd like to talk more on that a little later. I want to get the lay of things upstairs now.
I suppose anything Mrs. Peters does will be all right. She's going to take some clothes out to her, a few little things. We left in such a hurry yesterday morning.
Yes, but I would like to see what you take, Mrs. Peters. And keep an eye out for anything that might be of use to us.
Yes, Mr. Henderson.
All right, gentlemen, this way.
I'd hate to have men coming into my kitchen, snooping around and criticizing.
Of course, it's no more than their duty.
Duty's all right, but I guess that deputy sheriff that came out to make the fire might have got a little of this on. Wish I'd thought of that sooner. It seems mean to talk about her for not having things slicked up when she had to come away in such a hurry.
Yes. She had bread set.
She was going to put this bread in the bread box.
Oh, leave it be, Mrs. Hale.
It's a shame about her fruit. I wonder if it's all gone. No, I think there's one here that's all right, Mrs. Peters. Yes, it's cherries, too. I declare I think that's the only one. She'll feel awful bad after all her hard work in the hot weather. I remember the afternoon I put up my cherries last summer.
Well, I must get those things from the front room closet. My, it's cold in there.
Did you find everything?
I think so.
Oh my. Wright was close. I think maybe that's why she kept so much to herself. She didn't even belong to the Ladies' Aid. I suppose she felt she couldn't do her part. And then you don't enjoy things when you feel shabby. She used to wear pretty clothes and be lively when she was Minnie Foster, one of the town girls singing in the choir. But that was 30 years ago. Was that all you was to take in?
She said she wanted an apron. Funny thing to want, for there isn't much to get you dirty in jail, goodness knows. But I suppose just to make her feel more natural. She said they was in this top drawer of this cupboard here. Ah, yes, here it is. And then her little shawl was in another. Yes, here.
Mrs. Peters,
Yes, Mrs. Hale?
do you think she did it?
Oh, I don't know.
Well, I don't think she did. Asking for an apron and her little shawl. Worrying about her fruit.
Mr. Peters says it looks bad for her. Mr. Henderson's awful sarcastic in a speech, and he'll make fun of her saying that she didn't wake up.
Well, I guess John Wright didn't wake when they was slipping that rope under his neck.
No, it's strange. Must have been done awful crafty and still. They say it was such a funny way to kill a man, rigging it up like that.
That's just what Mr. Hale said. There was a gun in the house. He says that's what he can't understand.
Well, Mr. Henderson said coming out that what was needed for the case was a motive, something to show anger or sudden feeling.
Oh, well, I don't see any signs of anger around here. It was wiped to here. I wonder how they're finding things upstairs. I hope she had it a little more read up there. You know, it seems kind of sneaking. Locking her up and then coming out here and trying to get her own house to turn against her.
But Mrs. Hale, the law is the law.
I suppose 'tis. Better loosen up your things, Mrs. Peters. You won't feel them when you go out.
Yes, Mrs. Hale. She was piecing a quilt. Look.
It's log cabin pattern. Pretty, isn't it?
Now watch your step here.
I wonder if she was going to quilt it or just knot it.
She wonders if they were going to quilt it or just knot it.
Well, let's go on out to the barn and get that cleared up.
I don't think it's so strange, us taking up our time with little things while we're waiting for them to get the evidence. I don't know as it's anything to laugh about.
Of course, they've got awful important things on their minds.
Oh, this is pretty. Oh, look at that. Mrs. Peters, look at this. Here, this is the one she was working on, and look at the sewing. All the rest of it has been so nice and even, and look at that. It's all over the place. Why, it looks as if she didn't know what she was about.
Mrs. Hale, what are you doing?
Just pulling out a stitch or two that's not sewed very good. Bad sewing always made me fidgety.
I don't think we should touch anything.
I'll just finish up this end. Mrs. Peters,
Yes, Mrs. Hale?
what do you suppose she was so nervous about?
I don't know that she was nervous. I sometimes sew awful queer when I'm just tired. Well, I must get these things packed up. They may be through sooner than you think. I wonder where I can find a sack.
Under the sink, maybe.
Why, here's a bird cage. Did she have a bird, Mrs. Hale?
Why, I don't know whether she did or not. I've not been here for so long. There was a man around last year selling canaries cheap, but I don't know whether she took one. Maybe she did. She used to sing real pretty herself.
Seems strange to think of a bird here. But she must have had one, or why would she have a cage? I wonder what happened to it.
I suppose maybe the cat got it.
Oh no, she didn't have a cat. She's got that feeling some people have about cats, being afraid of them. My cat got in her room and she got real upset and asked me to take it out.
My sister Bessie was like that. Queer, ain't it?
My, look at this door. This hinge is pulled apart.
It looks as if someone has been rough with it.
Why, yes.
I wish if they was going to find the evidence, they'd be about it. I don't like this place.
Well, I'm awful glad you came with me, Mrs. Hale. It would have been lonesome for me sitting here alone.
It would be, wouldn't it? But I tell you what I do wish, Mrs. Peters. I wish I had come here when she was here. I wish I had.
But of course you were awful busy with your house and your family.
I could have come. I stayed away because it weren't cheerful. And that's why I ought to have come. I've never liked this place. Maybe because it's down in a hollow and you don't see the road. I don't know what it is, but it's a lonesome place. It always was. I wish I had come to see Minnie Foster sometimes. I can see that now.
You mustn't reproach yourself, Mrs. Hale. Somehow we just don't see how it is with other folks until something comes up.
Not having children makes less work, but it makes a quiet house. And Wright out to work all day, and no company when he did come in. Did you know John Wright, Mrs. Peters?
Not to know him. I'd seen him in town. They say he was a good man.
Yes, good. He didn't drink, kept his word as well as most, I guess, and paid his debts. But he was a hard man, Mrs. Peters. Just to pass the time of day with him, like a raw wind, it gets to the bone. I should think she would have wanted a bird. What do you suppose went with it?
I don't know, unless it got sick and died.
You weren't raised around here, were you?
No,
You didn't know her.
not till they brought her yesterday.
She come to think of it, was like a bird herself, real sweet and pretty, but kind of timid and fluttery. Tell you what, Mrs. Peters, why don't you take the quilt in with you? It may take up her mind.
Why, I think that's a real nice idea, Mrs. Hale. There couldn't possibly be any objection to it, could there? Now, what would I take? What would she need from her kit?
What a pretty box. Here's some black thread and some scissors.
You know, why don't I just take the whole kit?
It's like something somebody would give you. I wonder what's inside. There's something wrapped up in this handkerchief. Oh, Mrs. Peters.
It's the bird.
But Mrs. Peters, look at it. Its neck, look at its neck. It's all other side too.
Somebody wrung its neck.
Well, he sure kept his barn in right order.
Well, ladies, have you decided if she was going to quilt it or to knot it?
We think she was going to knot it.
Well, that's interesting, I'm sure. Oh, has the bird flown?
We think the cat got it.
Oh, is there a cat?
Well, not now. They're superstitious, you know. They leave.
There's no sign at all of anyone having come from the outside, their own rope. Let's go up again and go over it piece by piece. It had to have been someone who knew the layout of the house and maybe what time they went to sleep.
She liked the bird. She was going to bury it in that pretty box.
When I was a girl, my kitten, there was a boy who took a hatchet, and before I could get there, before my eyes, if they hadn't held me back, I would have hurt that boy.
I wonder how it would seem never to have had children around. No, Wright wouldn't like the bird. A thing that sang. She used to sing. He killed that too.
We don't know who killed the bird.
I knew John Wright.
There was an awful thing that was done in this house that night, Mrs. Hale. Killing a man while he slept, slipping a rope around his neck that choked the life out of him.
His neck choked the life out of him.
We don't know who killed him. We don't know.
If there had been years and years of silence, then a bird to sing to you, it would be awful still once the bird was still.
I know what stillness is. When we homesteaded in Dakota, my first baby died after he was 2 years old, and me with no other then.
Oh, my dear. When do you think they'll be through looking for the evidence?
I know what stillness is. But Mrs. Hale, the law has got to punish crime.
I wish you would have seen Minnie Foster when she wore a white dress with blue ribbons and stood up in the choir and sang. Oh, I wish I had come over here once in a while. That was a crime. That was a crime. Who's going to punish that?
We mustn't take on.
I might have known she needed help. I know how it can be with women. I tell you, it's queer, Mrs. Peters. We live close together and we live far apart. We all go through the same things. It's just a different kind of same thing. If I was you, I wouldn't tell her fruit was gone. Tell her it ain't. Tell her it's all right. Take this in to prove it to her. She might never know whether it was broke or not.
Why, it's a good thing the men couldn't hear us. Wouldn't they laugh? Getting all stirred up about a dead canary, as if that could have anything to do with, wouldn't they laugh?
Maybe they would. Maybe they wouldn't.
Well, you ought to have about what you need now, I think, don't
No, Peters. It's perfectly clear, except for a reason for doing it. You know juries when it comes to women. If only there was some definite thing, something to make a story about, something to show, some way to connect up with this strange way of doing it.
Well, I brought the team around. It sure is cold out there.
I'm gonna stay here for a while by myself. You can send Frank out for me, can't you? I want to go over everything again. I'm not satisfied we can't do better.
You want to see what Mrs. Peters is going to take in?
Oh, I suppose the ladies haven't chosen too many dangerous things. Nah. Mrs. Peters doesn't need supervising. For that matter, a sheriff's wife is married to the law. Ever think of it that way, Mrs. Peters?
Not just that way.
Married to the law. Well, George, I'd like you to just hang back here for just a minute, okay? I think we ought to take another look at these windows.
Windows.
We'll be right out, Mr. Hale.
Right.
Well, Henry, at least we found out she was not going to quilt it. She was going to... What is it you call it, ladies?
We call it knot it, Mr. Henderson.